Hey everybody, Elad from Ghosteam here, and in this video we're gonna have a full overview of GhosteamLive and how to operate everything in a pack from A to Z. So let's go! Let's start by going loop by loop and showing you what parameters do you get and what can you do with them. First, I'm gonna really go into detail into every parameter, and once they start to repeat, I'm gonna go a bit faster so I can go quickly through all the loops and show you what they can do. So look number one, we're gonna have this boxes with light emitters, and let's start with the parameter that is called camera Z. It does exactly what you think. It can zoom in and out, so you can decide where to position the camera along the Z space. And light power, it controls the light emission. Light hue, exactly what you think. It's going to control the hue like a rotary. So you go from 0 to 360 to switch between all the colors on the palette. Light saturation, in case you want a white pattern or anything that is in between, use that slider. Flicker mode, and this is gonna come right after the light power area in each of the looks. That will create a flicker situation. Light mode. It's also something that repeats between loops. We either have all on or chaser. And when you're talking about the chase light effect, right under it you will find the chase speed, which controls the speed which the chase light goes with. If you right click a parameter, it locks to the defaults. That's a Resolume feature and I found it very useful. Light texture, full or swipe. Once you go to swipe, you're gonna get kind of like this swipe that goes vertically on the front and sideways on the centers. And if you turn on, you can see exactly what it's doing. Now we have enable front texture, enable side texture, and inherit color. What does, and I'm gonna go into detail about it afterwards, after we finish going all over the loops. It's gonna import anything from the output layer. So let's say we're gonna turn on this lines generator, which you cannot see right now because I disabled it in the output, in the advanced output. And I'm gonna enable it as a texture. As you can see, it's gonna just import that and use that instead of the light emitter. So that's what those are doing. Inherit color is going to inherit the color of the main light source. So if we're gonna change that, it's gonna inherit that color as well. Keep in mind that you can switch all of the textures live, so everything that you put there is gonna update right away. Room. Room is gonna turn on and off basically the 3D environment. And if we're gonna, for example, use this clip here in the back, keep in mind that all of the loops have alpha channels. So if we're turning room off, you're going to see that it has complete alpha behind it, and you can combine anything you want below it. And panels, that controls the amount of 3D panels renders in the scene. So if we're gonna turn it to 4, 3, you're gonna see it's just gonna update right away. So you can be the director of your own 3D scene and decide how you want to spread it. Rotation is gonna create this movement between 0 and 90 degrees, and distance is gonna keep them apart. So if you combine them, you can create a very interesting combination. Or if you completely turn this into 90 degrees, then you can, for example, create this kind of setup, which is completely different. Great. A virtual grid and horizontal grid, exactly what it sounds like. You can either disable the grid completely, let's put it back on chase mode so it looks a bit interesting, or create this kind of variation. You can also turn off the front lights, turn off the side lights, or reverse flow that will change the flow of the chaser lights. Look 2 is a ring of sorts, and you can see it already comes with the chaser light effect. The stuff we talked about before repeats here. We have the camera Z, the light power, the light hue, and the saturation as well. Here we have something called screws power, which is those little screws on the outer edge of the ring, which you can also turn off and on. Flicker mode just like before. Chaser exactly like before. Reverse flow does the same. It will turn the flow to the other side. Enable texture and inherit color. In this one, they relate to something that we will see in a bit, so I'm gonna skip this for a second. X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation, exactly what it sounds like. It's going to rotate the ring to either one of the axes. You can also combine, but I always think it's nicer to focus on one axis at a time. Room, exactly like before. Grow ball. Now we have two developments that you can use. We have the grow ball, which is kind of like this 3D earth. Let's close the room so it's a bit more clear. We have the mini ball, which is the light ball that comes underneath that. And that works with the enable texture. So if I'm going to enable texture now, you're going to see it's importing the visuals from this layer. We can import a logo, and of course, one thing to notice, for example, the logo is too big, we can go into the settings here in Resolume and just scale that down. And what you can do as well, you can also rotate the mini ball. So if we click ball rotation and let's turn up the rotation speed, then we're getting this cool effect. Loop 3 is a 3D cube that you can play a lot with. Cube is my favorite element, actually. You should know that. I love cubes. Then we have bulb power, bulb hue. Now the bulbs are inside the cube, so we're gonna get into that a bit later. Flicker mode, the same as before. Light mode, chase mode. And again, we have this bulb mode, which is chase for the bulbs, which you don't see yet. But if we're gonna go here and click open cube, then we're gonna see the light bulbs. Again, you can change the hue to a different situation. You can turn them on or go back to chase. And we can turn again the room on, we can turn the room off. We can rotate the cube. We can outer rotate, which basically rotates the outer panels. And what we can do here is again turn on the enable texture, which would import the texture to the front surface of the cube. Just for a second, turn it on so we can see what it does. Let's put the Ghosteam logo, let's scale it back up this way. I wanted to inherit the color, that looks great. And maybe let's make it blue as well. And there you go, we have it, loop number 3. Loop number 4 is a sort of a tunnel, which you can go infinitely into. Let's go over that now. We have the general parameters that we talked about before, the flicker mode. And what's cute here is there is this feature called open doors, which seems like, oh, what's it gonna do? Which door is it gonna open? Let's find out. Oh, these doors. And now, if we're gonna hit the drive button, that's gonna turn into a pretty sweet ride. You can also turn on minimalistic, which will basically eliminate the metallic parts around the cube, which will make it maybe a bit more flat, but on the other hand, you can see more because otherwise the metallic parts are hiding what you see in the distance. So that's one thing. If we stop the drive, it's gonna stop in location. And what we can also do is, of course, control the drive speed if you want to go really slow or really fast. And you can also enable the Z rotation. Welcome to loop number 5. Here we have a bunch of controls for power, for everything basically. We have the Windows power. Maybe I put it for a second on so we can see what's going on. The Windows power, which is those front panels in the front, which basically when you turn them off, you can see it reveals this wire element, which is here in the bottom. We have the wire power. So we have the Windows power, screen power, which is the screen that sits on top, screws power, which is the dots on the outer edge and here in the middle, and the wire power, which is this part right here. Every one of them has power selector and also a U selector, so you can control the U and the power separately. Very useful. Arm count, which is a amount of models. If you want to have it more full or maybe more minimalistic, it's just 2. Up to you. We have a separated chase on selector for the screen and chase on selector for the windows. And even here, like before, we have the chase speed. The enable texture feature goes for the screen. So if we turn them on, you can see it reveals the texture input feature on the top. And then we have fun stuff. So rotate each and rotate all. Rotate each is going to rotate each arm by itself. For example, Y rotation or X rotation and Z rotation. Now you ask yourself, this might seem a bit messy. Why would I use that? I'll show you. Let's stop it and click on this reset rotation. If we're just gonna check this rotate all for a second, this will just rotate everything as a bunch, as if it treats all the arms as one piece, which is also great. But if you want to create some interesting variation, what you can do is, for example, rotate a little bit on the Y, rotate a little bit on the X, and now rotate everything on the Y. And then in this way, you kind of can create new variation, new ways of the arms putting themselves on. Just give it a little bit of the Z, maybe try this way. And then the more you play with it, the more variations you get. So that's why I wanted to give you an option to twist them both ways. See, this is, for example, something different now. And if you want to reset, no problem. Like I showed you before, you just click reset button What you can also do is alternate the Y rotation, which will basically create this effect, or you can delay Y rotation, which will basically kind of give a step delay on each of the arms and create kind of like this delayed effect. Nice. Next thing you can do here is eject screen, which will basically rotate the screen from the position they are right now to face the camera. Cool. Inherit color, just like before, it will inherit the color of the windows. Flicker mode, just like before. And what's cool about it is that you can start really close. Maybe if we put like 3 arms, so there's one in the middle, and they go really backwards and creates a lot of variations. Loop number 6 is my tower loop. And what we can see here that is unique. We have the light, which is the view of the screens, and we have the secondary, which is this top view light emitter. Now, what we can do here, of course, as before, we can enable texture, we can inherit color, that's all great. We can control the amount of towers, so how many you put in a scene, and of course keep in mind the more you put, the more it goes on your GPU, so you should find some kind of like a healthy middle ground of what is good for you. The X gap will control the distance between the tower, which we can also use for animation, and I'll show you that afterwards. Drive, just like before, it's just gonna start the drive animation, and you can control the speed as well. And what's happening, it's basically creating this endless look of the towers. Every time tower passes the camera, it basically teleports it to the front, so we're getting this endless animation of the towers. The rotation, just like before, it's just gonna start spinning us around, and also you can control the rotation speed, of course. If you disable it, it's gonna reset back to 0. And then we have the camera rotation, which is if you want to do some stuff manually, and this can be cute, for example, if we're gonna put it like this, and then we're gonna getting this horizontal drive instead of a vertical drive, or you can even just put it on the side, and it's up to you. You can also animate that later. I right click to reset back to 0. Angle X will basically, let's put something there so we can see it better. Angle X will basically turn the towers towards us, and angle Y will turn them on their side. Loop number 7. Here we have a bunch of cubes. Told you I love cubes. And we can control a lot of nice things. We have the light mode, which is single chase, is what you see right now. Road chase is gonna go from the bottom to the top, like that. Side chase is gonna go from left to right, and all on just like before. Now, we have 2 enabled textures here, one for the outer panels and one for the inner panels, which we're gonna see in a second. X cubes is controlling the amount of cubes on the X axis, and Y cubes, as you can guess, on the Y axis. You can here as well control the X and Y gap. And of course, everything behind this is alpha, so you can use anything you want. Let's go back. And so enable texture is gonna reveal the texture on the front panel. Just reset that for a second. And what we can do is open doors. Open doors is gonna open those panels and reveal the inside, which has a secondary use. So we can basically have kind of like this, oh sorry, here, like a multicolor display. You can inherit the color, multicolor display, woohoo! And then what you can do with the inner screens, you can either have them like that, you can click eject, which will push them out, and then you can also control the eject distance, so we can like kind of like create some kind of BPM effect, which I'll show you how to do later. Or we can eject sync, which will basically connect the position of those panels to the light mode. So that means we have to have, for example, the road chase on, not the all on. If we click eject sync, you see it's going to sync those panels to the light mode. And it's very cool. And you can, of course, enable the texture here as well. And then we can say, okay, now we're gonna bring them in, and then we're gonna close the doors. Loop number 8, the neon room. And you know, I love neon so much. Oh my God, oof, I'm getting nervous here. Neon loop. What we have here, which is unique. Camera Z just as always, but because it's a very diverse and detailed loop, I added something called set multiplier, which what happens if you turn it to 2, it basically means you can go further away or closer in with the camera Z. So sometimes it's very useful, especially if you work in very weird resolutions or maybe something that's very narrow, then trust me, you're gonna find this useful. That's why I put it there. And then we have the screen power, which is the power of those screens that appear here, but also are going to appear in various places in this loop, and I'm going to show you it right away. Now, what's happening in this loop is basically it's a dynamic loop in a few rooms, basically, that you can go from one room to another. And in each room, I named it as N1 for room number 1, N2 for room number 2. So in order to see what's happening here, we have to scroll a bit down, and you see there is this thing called development and camera position. And why they are separate, I'm going to show you in a second. So we have the first loop here, and what's happening is I'm going to click L2, which is basically level 2. The doors are going to open up, and we're going to reveal level 2, which is basically this wall and the neons here below. So if I'm going to go a bit up now and play with neon 2U, basically we're getting control for the other level. And this level has an option for animation for the neons. Inside, ejected and move. Ejected is basically going to bring them out, and move is going to create this like slow animation. And you can control the speed, and you can also pause the chase in case you say, oh, this is cool, I want to stay like that. Pretty nice. Next, we're going to have to move to room number 3. So let's go down and click 3. Woo! Let's bring those neon inside. And as you can see, we have another copy of those screens that we had before. So everything that you change here in the screen U is going to update right away. And then let's move on. What happens now? Why we have a development and a camera? Development controls the development of the animation, and camera controls where are we in the scene. So we can click position 2 up, and it's going to frame automatically to room number 2. So maybe you want to have diversity. You want to say, okay, maybe I want to start like this, and I want to move to position number 2, but then I can close the door on this room and just have it like that, and then go back to position number 1. So you can play with it together or separately. That's up to you. You can also jump from level 1 to level 3. You don't necessarily have to go one by one. And then let's go to position 2. And just as always, I'm going to show this quickly. If we're going to turn on enable texture, we're basically going to get what we had before. Importing the texture animation to the screen. Let's do inherit color for now. And let's check what's happening in room number 4. Woo! We're going to get this room is screened. I can just disable this to show what's going on. And room number 4 has the screen rotation feature. You see, it also, of course, has the power of the neons. And here we can control in the top the power of the screen, just as before. And if you enable screen rotation, it's going to start rotating. Woohoo! Let's import the screen again, so it's a bit more interesting. There you go. And if we go to position 3, we're basically going to focus on that. And the next one you see is called alpha. And why is it called alpha? Let's enable this clip below here that is under the layer. And let's click alpha. And you see this room is basically going to open and reveal the alpha. And this is how this loop works. You can close it back and go back with the camera. And this is how you can play this room situation. What you can also do is basically have the camera being synced to the development. So if you click sync, it's basically going to move the camera to the relevant position. If I'm in level 1, it's going to be in level 1. If I'm in level 3, it's going to move to level 3. So it's up to you if you want to have it manually or synced. Completely up to you. And reverse neon is just going to reverse the directions the neons are flowing, which is actually pretty horribly colored right now. I'm so sorry about it. That's not like me. I'm not choosing bad color combinations. How dare you? Let's just stay with something like this. Pretty cool. Loop number 8. Now loop number 9, the smoke room. What we have here. We have the light emitters that come from these cubicle emissions, and we have the light on top. So light hue will be the color of the light, and frame hue would be the color on the top. Let's do blue and yellow. That's nice. Now we have the flicker mode as always, and here we have the types of the light chase. Single will just go one by one. Row chase will just go row by row. Maybe we turn the light power a bit off so you can see better what's happening. And shoot is one of my favorite ones. Especially, it's kind of like flicker mode, but kind of like a single flicker. So it's not everything together, it's one by one. Ta-ta. Let's flip this. Let's have it this way. Cool, right? And all on, of course, a bit burning in this case. Don't burn my eyes. Now, back texture, what it's gonna do is going to basically show you kind of like a screen in the back. So you see, it's kind of like a hologramic feature that I thought of to put the screen in the back, and then you can of course control the power. You can inherit the color. Light texture is basically gonna do the same. It's gonna take this texture here and put it inside of the lights. You cannot really see it right now, but I'm gonna show you when and how you can see it just in a second. Let's turn this off for a second. Room light. It's basically controls to see how much light we get on the rooms here. If I turn the light power off and you want to start with a dark room, for example, you can turn this room feature. So it will give you a little bit of light emission so you don't start with complete darkness. Now fog. Fog is something that could be heavy in your GPU and heavy to render. And that's why I have this feature here where you can turn the fog on and off, and you can play with that and see how your computer takes the situation. And if you turn the fog on, you will see it. And if you turn it off, we're gonna get still a cool effect, but much easier on your GPU. Now, fog intensity. I'm gonna show you later on why we need that. For now, it looks pretty good. Virtual net and horizontal net, vertical net and horizontal net is kind of like this grid feature that creates this depth, and I thought it can be a good dynamic feature for the loop. X lights and Z lights. Let's go back to light chase. Oops, single chase, not light chase. Let's turn the light power down. You can, of course, here also dynamically control how many lights are going to appear in the scene. You can start with more or go with less. Also, the more lights we have, the heavier it is to render. That's why I think 4x4 is kind of like a healthy maximum, but you go and play with that, check your computer. Face camera is a cool feature which will basically turn all the lights towards the camera. Pretty neat. Light blocker. Light blocker is in combination with fog can look pretty cool. So for example, let's choose ring. You can see it basically kind of like puts a texture on each of the lights, holes, stripes, and creates this cool volumetric light effects. And what you can do is, if you think the fog is not intense enough or not visible enough, for example, with the rings feature, you can use this fog intensity to raise the brightness. Keep in mind that this can cause a little bit of pixelization in the fog, so try to use it when needed and not just all the time. Spin blocker, let's choose this price here, it's just gonna rotate that and create this. As you can see, it also reflects on the screen. We have the position feature. And what does that do? It's basically, I created a few poses, preset poses, so you can choose pose 1, pose 2, pose 3, or pose 4. And those come with animations as well. So first of all, you can choose the position chase, synced. And then if we change the base height, it basically tells where to start basically where is the minimum and the maximum of the height situation. So the minimum would be at the very top, and if you want to have a smaller range animation, you can also play with that slider, and it works like this. If we go to fixed, which basically means you can animate it manually, fixed and off, it means you can animate it manually, so we can also later do some manual animations. But if you want, you can just use one of the poses and click synced or delayed, which will basically move them in relation to one another in a little bit of time delay, so you get a more realistic animation. And also for the chase speed, you can choose how fast you want it, and you can also decide to pause it and say, oh, this is cool, let's rotate it into camera, oh, this is awesome, I love GhosteamLive. Loop number 10, woohoo, the last one for this batch. What we have here is a bit more dynamic controls for the camera, because this is like a cube setup. And what we can do is we have manual controls for the Z, for the Y, and for the X. And of course, this looks a bit weird. So let's just back up a little on the Z here and maybe rotate it a bit on the Y axis. And then you can basically place your whole 3D setup in your most favorite place. Rotation anim is the same as before. You can use it to spin this whole thing on either of the axes, either Y, X, or Z. So let's go, for example, for the Y rotation. And like before, you can also rotate it on each of the axes. And that can be cool. For example, you can move it this way, and let's move it to this side. And you can even combine it with a mirror effect from Resolume. And we're just basically going to create like this cool effect. For example, not a mask, but I'm just showing you what you can do here. It's a combination of everything. We have the top power, which is these panels here on top. We have the sides, which are the panels on the sides, and we have the frame. And you can decide how you want. You can start with, for example, just the frame. And of course, each of them has also a hue slider. And then you can basically create a combination of what is interesting to you and create the nicest setup ever. Let's make something like this maybe. Saturation, same as before. Flicker mode, same as before. Now, single chase will go one by one. And then we have X-row chase, zero chase, and random. And of course, here you can also create it, control the speed. You can go really fast or really slow. That's up to you. Import texture, same as always. We have the top, we have the sides, and you can see, and we have the inherit color if you want to keep the color running. You can control the amount of boxes. So even here, everything is dynamic. And again, I would recommend not to go in crazy numbers. Stay within this one. It's cute. Let's turn back the Y animation. I like that. Let's do this. Now the position chase. We have similar to the light modes. Now we can maybe go a bit lower on the Y so we can see what's happening. We have the single position, which will basically go one by one with a small delay. We have the X row, which will go by the row. It's zero, which will go by sideways, even though when it spins, it doesn't look like much difference there. But trust me, it's different. And we have the random, which will also just kind of like go randomly as a single cube. Now the position multiplier, the more you increase it, it will distance the cubes from each other by more, basically. Whether it will be on the lowest option, they will be closer together, and if you put it on the higher option, which is number 4, they will be separated. Position speed, same as before. You can control the speed animation. You can also pause it, so you can decide, okay, this is how I want it right now. And you can start like this, and you can say, okay, let's move on. One of the great things about GhosteamLive is that you can take any look and duplicate it and get a completely different variation, just like a preset. So we're gonna click on loop 1, for example, and click Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V over here. And now, if you see in the top, we have this switch loop, which we're not gonna touch, and variation. So let's change that to number 2, for example. And now Unreal will know that it's a different loop. So let's say if we're changing here the light hue, one thing we have to do is reload it after you change the variation. Let's change the hue. Let's put it on flicker mode. Let's maybe take the camera backwards. Turn off the room, and let's have it only of 3 panels. Now, if I click on the original variation, it's gonna load a different set of parameters. And if we click on a new one, as you can see, it's being treated like a new variation. And this is how you do clip duplication. To sync anything to BPM in Resolume, you have to do a couple of things. You click on the slider that you want here on this little cogwheel, and we're gonna choose BPM Sync. That's first. Then we have to click on it again, and we have to click Envelope. Now we have to choose an envelope. How do we do that? There's this little preset icon here on the right. And the one I like to usually go with is 4 to the floor, so we're gonna choose that. And right away, we basically have BPM synced automatically to the light power. So what you can do, for example, is use the same thing, and to do it on the top power, let's go that. Do the same, we're gonna hit BPM sync, we're gonna hit envelope, and we're gonna hit 4 to the floor. And as you can see, for example, now, they are syncing to exactly the same thing. But for example, what if we go and put it on 8? You see, now we have this kind of variation. You can also make it faster. You can put it on 1 or 2. And that's how you BPM sync. Texture input is basically the parameter that is called enable texture on almost every of the loops. Here we have it over here, and what it would do, it will take basically anything that exists in this layer in Resolume that is called output, and anything you put here, it can be a camera, it can be text, it can be images, it can even be videos. Everything you put here is gonna go into Unreal and go back into Resolume. So for example, if we turn this, let's just so we can see better. If we enable the front and side texture, as you can see, it's been imported from this group here. So anything we change, it will right away update. And one thing that can sometimes happen is that it will stop working out of the blue. I have no idea what that happens. I think it's somehow related to the advanced output window, because what I found is that when it happens and I'm going to output and advanced, it automatically fixes itself. So it's maybe somehow related to the output being confused or something like that. And just keep in mind that if it happens to you, just open the advanced output window and it will work again. For MIDI Sync, we have two options, this clip method and selected clip method, and I'm going to demonstrate both. Let's go to the menus on the top, shortcuts, or Ctrl-Shift-M for edit MIDI, and we're going to choose the color, for example. We're going to click the color slider, move this knob, and make sure it says selected clip. Let's go to loop number 2, for example, and Ctrl-Shift-M, go to the color slider, move the same knob as before, and make sure it says selected clip. Now what we did here is basically a local color control. So we can say that this knob will be the color control, but every loop will have a different color because they are not synced. It only works on the selected clip. Let's try the different method. With this clip, let's remove it with this so we can start from scratch. We will click the hue. Let's move a knob. And instead of selected clip, we change to this clip. Go to loop number 2 and choose the light hue. Move the same knob as before and make sure it says this clip. Now we have a global color control. So every color we choose here will be the same in the other loop, or all loops, depends how many loops you choose for this setting. Great, no? Another thing you can do, for example, flicker mode. Let's click on the flicker mode and choose this button, for example. Make sure it says this clip. Go to loop number 1, Ctrl-Shift-M, flicker mode, same button, this clip. And now if we turn the flicker on here, it will also be on here. Turn it off, and it's also off here. And there you go, MIDI Sync with GhosteamLive. Animation and envelopes are awesome tools that come with Resolume that we can use, and not just to BPM sync, but to also create any kind of animation within GhosteamLive. So for example, if we're gonna take this distance slider, for example, and we can set it to timeline, doesn't have to be BPM sync, it's basically gonna animate from the left to right over a specific amount of time. Let's say we don't really want it to go until the end, we can set it until here. So we're going to create this animation. We can change it from loop to bounce, so it goes back and forth. And if it seems a bit robotic, we can do like before, we can add an envelope. And instead of linear, we can either choose here a pattern, or we can choose here a pattern. So we can try this exponential in-out, for example. And then you see the animation is much more smooth. And over here, you can define, instead of maybe this weird amount of seconds that we have here right now, I don't know why, let's put 10. And then we're gonna get this really smooth animation over time that those panels are going in and then opening and out. You can also add the same animation to the rotation. Maybe put it on bounce. And again, not all the way to the end, because then they kind of collide. So maybe we stop here. And add an envelope and put, let's try sine. This looks a bit boring. Maybe something that is more dynamic like this. Yeah. Ooh. You get what I'm talking about. Go play.